I was still wearing the neck brace from my car accident when my stepsister decided to make a point. We were at my father's house 2 days after his funeral. I was arranging flowers when Catherine walked up behind me. I didn't see her hands coming. She grabbed my neck brace and twisted it tight. I gasped. My airway closed, my vision blurred at the edges. "A stepchild like you thinks you can fight me for the inheritance?" She hissed into my ear, her breath hot against my skin. I clawed at the brace, desperate for air. My knees buckled. I hit the floor hard, and the room, they laughed. My stepmother, Janet, the cousins, someone actually chuckled like it was dinner theater. No one helped me, not one person. I lay there on the cold tile, tears streaming down my face, thinking, this is my family. This is what I am to them. But what Catherine didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my father had left something behind, something that would change everything in exactly 1 week. Have you ever been humiliated by the people who were supposed to protect you? My name is Lindsay Donovan. I'm 35 years old, a financial analyst who spent the last decade building a career from nothing, with no help from the people who were supposed to be my family. Everything I have, I earned myself. I learned early that relying on others would only lead to disappointment. When my father passed away, I drove 6 hours to attend his funeral. Part of me hoped that death might do what life never could, bring us together. I was wrong. Janet, my stepmother of 22 years, met me at the front door like I was a solicitor she hadn't ordered. "Your old room has been converted to storage. You can sleep in the guest room," she said casually. I stood there, holding my overnight bag, and understood immediately that nothing had changed. I wasn't a grieving daughter returning home. I was an inconvenience. Dinner that evening revealed the family dynamics in full color. Janet sat at the head of the table, my father's chair, I noticed, and held court. The conversation turned to my father's final months, and suddenly I was on trial. "We were here every single day caring for him," Janet announced, "feeding him, bathing him, managing his medications. It was exhausting." She paused, letting her gaze drift to me. Some of us had other priorities, of course. Catherine jumped in eagerly. "Some people only show up when there's something to gain." I felt my face burn. Years of carefully constructed narrative had already convicted me. Lindsay, the absent daughter, the selfish one. Never mind that Janet had spent years making my visits unwelcome. I noticed something odd as I excused myself from the table. Security cameras installed in the hallway, new and sleek. My father had always complained about technology, refused to even own a smartphone. Why would he suddenly install a surveillance system? The next morning, preparing for the funeral, my neck brace became their new target. "Do you really have to wear that thing? It makes everything look so dramatic," Janet asked. Then came the attack. Catherine's hands on my brace, the choking, the laughter. And lying on the floor, I couldn't stop replaying her words. She hadn't said, "You don't deserve any money." Instead, she'd hissed something stranger. "You were never really part of this family." Why those specific words? What did Catherine know that I didn't? That question haunted me for weeks. You were never really part of this family. The more I turned it over in my mind, the more certain I became that she meant something specific, something beyond ordinary cruelty. I tried to move forward, but every night I found myself staring at the ceiling, feeling the phantom pressure of that neck brace tightening around my throat. The bruises faded, but the memory didn't. Then the phone calls started. My cousin Margaret called first, her voice hesitant and strange. "Lindsay, I just wanted to check on you. Janet mentioned you've been having a hard time since your accident. She said you've been acting a little erratic." A few days later, my Uncle Robert called with similar questions. I understood then what was happening. Janet wasn't just dismissing me anymore. She was building a narrative, planting seeds of doubt about my mental state. By the time any legal questions arose about my father's estate, the entire family would already believe I was too fragile, too unreliable to be taken seriously. Catherine took a more direct approach. She sent me a text message that read like a legal threat dressed in sisterly concern. "I heard you've been telling people a different version of what happened at the funeral. I want to remind you that defamation is a serious matter. I have multiple witnesses who saw you cause a scene." She had witnesses, she said, the same people who laughed while I choked on the floor. I made the mistake of calling Janet directly, hoping to discuss the estate like rational adults. She cut me off. "We handled absolutely everything while you were absent for years, Lindsay. Don't suddenly pretend to care now that there might be money involved." She hung up before I could respond. For a moment, I considered giving up. Maybe they were right, and this was the price of my absence. Then I ran into Helen. It happened at a grocery store 3 weeks after the funeral. Helen Morrison had been my father's caregiver for 15 years, a constant presence in his life during all the years I felt pushed away. "I was hoping I might see you," Helen said quietly, glancing around as if someone might be watching. "There are things I need to tell you." We found a quiet corner, and Helen told me everything. She had been fired 2 months before my father died. "Your father was changing in those last months," she explained. "He was getting paranoid, but not in a confused way. He even installed a camera in his office because he thought someone was going through his papers." My heart began to pound. Helen leaned closer. "He told me something the week before Janet let me go." I felt the floor shift beneath my feet. My father had left something for me, something he didn't want Janet to find. Helen wasn't finished. "I tried to call you after the funeral, but your number had changed. I've been carrying this around for months, wondering if I should go to the police." I thanked Helen and drove straight to my father's house. I watched Janet and Catherine leave, then entered the house using the spare key I had kept hidden for years. I knelt beside the desk and felt along the underside until my fingers found a small latch. A panel clicked open, revealing a shallow compartment I never knew existed. Inside was a USB drive. I took it home and with shaking hands opened it on my laptop. The USB drive contained several audio files and one video file that was password protected. I played the audio first. My father's voice filled the room, tired and strained, speaking about pressure and being forced to make decisions he didn't want to make. He mentioned feeling watched, feeling trapped. He said he was documenting everything in case something happens. I couldn't unlock the video file no matter what passwords I tried, but I had enough to know that something was very wrong with the official story of my father's final months. The next morning, I visited an estate lawyer and handed over the USB drive for professional analysis. I also went to the police station and filed a formal assault report about the neck brace incident. I brought my medical records showing the injuries to my throat and neck. I mentioned the security cameras Janet had installed, the ones that might have captured everything. The officer took detailed notes and promised to investigate. I told no one about any of this, not Helen, not my cousins, no one. But somehow, Janet found out about the lawyer. Her next phone call came with a different tone entirely. Gone was the dismissive condescension. In its place was something harder, almost desperate. "Whatever you think you're doing, Lindsay, it won't work," she threatened. "Everyone knows you abandoned your father. No one will believe your word over ours." Catherine chimed in during a separate call. "We have documentation proving Dad wanted us to handle everything. You have nothing but desperation." But beneath the threats, I heard something new in their voices. Fear. Real fear. They weren't just protecting an inheritance. They were protecting something else. Something bigger than money. That night, my lawyer called. His voice was unusually serious, almost grim. "Lindsay, I finally accessed the locked video file. You need to come to my office first thing tomorrow morning. Clear your entire schedule." He paused, and I could hear him choosing his next words carefully. "I need you to answer honestly. Are you physically safe staying where you are right now?" I barely slept that night. The lawyer's question echoed in my mind until dawn. Was I physically safe? The fact that he felt the need to ask told me everything about what he had seen on that video file. I checked into a hotel before sunrise and waited for morning. His office was downtown, and he met me in the lobby himself, which struck me as unusual. David Chen was a man in his 50s, with a calm demeanor, but today his calm seemed strained. "The video file on your father's USB drive," he said carefully, "contains footage that fundamentally changes this case." He wouldn't show me the video yet. He said it would be better to reveal everything at once, in front of everyone, with proper witnesses present. The will reading was scheduled for 2 p.m. that very afternoon. I arrived early and sat in the conference room alone, waiting. Everything I had gathered over the past weeks, medical records, Helen's written statement, the police report number, was in a folder beside me. I had spent years being this family's punching bag. Today, that performance would end permanently. Janet and Catherine arrived precisely on time, looking like grieving widows from a magazine spread. Catherine slid into the chair across from me and reached over to pat my hand with theatrical sympathy. "Lindsay, I really hope we can finally put our differences aside and honor Dad's true wishes together." Her smile was perfect. Her eyes were ice. I said nothing and pulled my hand away. Janet settled beside her daughter, arranging her designer purse. She didn't acknowledge me at all, which was somehow worse than Catherine's fake warmth. The lawyer entered and closed the door. He spread documents across the table, his face revealing nothing. Janet watched him with the confidence of someone who already knew the outcome. "Before we begin," the lawyer said, "I need to address some irregularities that emerged during our review of Mr. Donovan's estate." Janet's smile flickered slightly. "The will you submitted for probate, Mrs. Donovan, cannot be legally validated." The lawyer's voice was level. "Medical records obtained during our investigation clearly demonstrate that Mr. Donovan lacked the mental capacity required to execute legal documents at the time that will was signed. His dementia diagnosis and documented cognitive decline make this indisputable under state law." Catherine shot to her feet. "That's absolutely impossible. He told us explicitly what he wanted." "Please sit down, Miss Donovan." The lawyer waited until she complied. The last legally binding will, signed 2 years prior, when Mr. Donovan was still fully lucid and competent, leaves 70% of the estate directly to his daughter, Lindsay. The room went silent. I watched Janet's carefully composed face freeze mid-expression, like a mask that had suddenly cracked. 20 years of planning, of poisoning my relationship with my father, all of it collapsing in seconds. "Furthermore," the lawyer continued, "we commissioned an independent handwriting analysis of the newer will. The expert's conclusion is that the signature shows clear signs of coercion and guided writing. Someone physically moved Mr. Donovan's hand." Catherine opened her mouth to argue, but before she could speak, her phone buzzed loudly against the table. She glanced at the screen, and I watched the color drain from her face completely. The police want me to come to the station immediately." The lawyer answered for her. "Mrs. Donovan, The assault report that Lindsay filed several weeks ago has completed its investigation. The security cameras installed in Mr. Donovan's home captured the incident at the funeral in complete detail. The police have classified it as assault. But the lawyer wasn't finished. During our examination of the estate's finances, we discovered additional concerns. Approximately $150,000 was withdrawn from Mr. Donovan's accounts over the past year without proper authorization. The transactions trace back to accounts controlled by Mrs. Donovan and her daughter. Mrs. Donovan currently owes approximately $200,000 in gambling debts, and Miss Catherine Donovan has accumulated roughly $80,000 in personal credit card debt. The financial motive for manipulating Mr. Donovan's estate planning is quite clear. The lawyer dimmed the lights and turned on a screen mounted on the wall. There is one more matter. The USB drive that Lindsay provided contained a video file her father recorded in his home office. The footage began to play. My father appeared on screen, sitting at his desk, his hands trembling visibly. He looked frail, confused. Catherine entered the frame and snatched papers from his weak grip. She forced a pen into his unsteady hand. Janet stood behind him, arms crossed, her voice cold and impatient. "Just sign the documents, Robert. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." My father's voice came through next, fragile and lost. "Where's Lindsay? I want to talk to Lindsay first. I want her here for this." Catherine's response was harsh. "She doesn't care about you, Dad. She's never cared. She abandoned you years ago. Now just sign it." I couldn't stop the tears. Not tears of anger, but tears of grief for a father who never stopped loving me, who asked for me even when they told him I didn't care. They had kept us apart deliberately. Catherine was escorted out by building security to meet the police waiting downstairs. Janet sat motionless in her chair, staring at nothing, her empire of lies crumbling. The lawyer placed a plain white envelope on the table in front of me. "Your father left a sealed personal letter with specific instructions. It's only to be opened after all legal matters are fully resolved." I kept the letter sealed, as advised, while the legal proceedings advanced. The night before Janet's preliminary hearing, I couldn't wait any longer. I sat at my desk, broke the seal, and unfolded the letter. The first line made my breath catch in my throat. "My dearest Lindsay, there's something I should have told you 20 years ago, but I was too much of a coward to face the consequences." The letter explained that 20 years ago, shortly after Catherine was born, my father discovered evidence of Janet's affair. The betrayal alone was devastating, but what came next shattered him. He arranged for DNA testing in secret. The results confirmed that Catherine was not his biological daughter. My father wrote that he stayed silent, believing he was protecting Catherine, but that silence made Janet fear exposure, and she systematically pushed me away because I was the only biological child, the only legitimate claim to his love. My silence, he wrote, was his greatest failure as my father. The letter ended. "You were always my true daughter, Lindsay. I'm leaving everything to you because I trust you to do what's right with it. I love you. Forgive me." The legal proceedings concluded. Both Janet and Catherine took plea deals. Catherine received 2 years of supervised probation and community service for assault and financial fraud. Janet was sentenced to 2 years in state prison for elder financial abuse. When Catherine confronted me about the letter afterward, I told her the truth about the DNA test. She screamed that it was lies, but somewhere deep in her eyes, I saw a flicker of recognition, A lifetime of small questions finally answered in the worst possible way. I sold the house but kept my father's antique desk with the secret compartment. I used a significant portion of my inheritance to establish the Robert Donovan Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting elderly victims of family financial abuse. My father's sister, Aunt Ruth, became a regular presence in my life, filling in the gaps of my father's history that Janet had worked so hard to erase. I finally understood the truth. Family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by the people who choose truth over lies, courage over silence, who choose you because they want to. I finally have that family. Lindsay's story teaches us that silence is not the same as peace, and endurance is not the same as strength. Lindsay's father stayed silent for 20 years, believing he was protecting everyone from pain. Instead, his silence allowed that pain to grow and spread like poison. The lesson is clear. Secrets protect abusers, not victims. If you recognize yourself in Lindsay's story, please hear this. You deserve better. You deserve respect. And sometimes standing up for yourself is the only way to break cycles of abuse that have been spinning for generations. If Lindsay's journey touched your heart, please leave a comment and tell me, have you ever had to stand up against people who were supposed to protect you? How did you find the courage to speak your truth? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you want more stories like this one, where silent victims find their voice and justice, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening. And remember, the light is coming for you too.